Superman is one of, if not the most iconic superhero of all time. He stands for truth, justice, and kindness, ideals that are considered to be outdated in our modern society. Unfortunately, however, he hasn't really had the best representation in movies. Unlike characters such as Batman and Spider Man, Superman doesn't have the luxury of a new reboot every 5 to 10 years or so. Instead, there are these long gaps between his different iterations, and that's seemingly because everyone is too afraid to touch the character. Ever since Superman 4, every new attempt to revitalise the character on the big screen has ended after only one movie, a trend that is hopefully about to end with Man of Tomorrow, the sequel to Superman 2025, coming out next summer. And so, with all this in mind, I want to take a look back at the Man of Steel's almost 50-year cinematic history so I can look at what worked, what didn't work, and well, everything in between. So, without further ado, let's begin. Superman the movie, released in 1978 and directed by Richard Donner, was the first proper live-action Superman movie released in cinemas. Yes, technically I know Superman and the Mole Man was the first Superman movie, but since it's only like 58 minutes long and I have no idea where I can watch it, I decided to exclude it. Besides, this is my video, I can do whatever the hell I want. Anyway, Superman the movie. This movie follows Superman, aka Clark Kent, aka Kal-El, played by the legendary Christopher Reeve, as he journeys from his dying home planet of Krypton to Earth. There he is discovered by the Kents, who would go on to raise him as their own son. After his father dies from not a tornado, Clark travels to the North Pole, where he spends years studying alongside an AI of his Kryptonian father, Marlon Brando. Once he has learned the ways of the Force and finally becomes Superman, an hour in might I add, he travels to the city of New York, Metropolis, where he meets Lois Lane, played by Margot Kidder. The rest of the movie from here has a pretty simple structure. We see Superman saving people and whatnot. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor, played by the wonderful Gene Hackman, plots to put the western coast of California at the bottom of the sea in order to create new beachfront property. I honestly love the plot of this movie. It's simple, sure, but everything that happens in it is so entertaining. I would say that the first hour or so is probably the weakest part of the film. Everything is just paced really slowly and scenes drag out for too long. This all changes though once we get to Metropolis. From here, the film is an absolute blast. Everything is so snappy and quick-witted that it's hard to be bored. The score for this film is iconic as well. John Williams really outdid himself, and there's a reason they're still using this theme to this day. The cast of this movie is easily the best part though. Everyone's giving it their all and no one seems to be phoning it in, which is kind of crazy when you consider the fact that this was a comic book movie made in the 70s. See, comic book movies didn't have the reputation they do now, and comic books themselves were still largely considered dumb entertainment for kids. This would have been so easy for the cast to half-arse it and just collect their paychecks. But they didn't, and that's something I'll always appreciate about this movie. Now, in spite of all the positives around this movie, it unfortunately isn't perfect. As I said before, the pacing in the first half is really slow. There are way too many scenes on Krypton, which is probably a result of them trying to, use Marlon Brando as much as possible. The scene with Superman and Lois flying over Metropolis. Come on, it's Statue of Liberty and the World Trade Center are right there. Goes on for way too long. All these issues aren't enough to ruin the movie for me, of course, but they do keep it from being perfect. My biggest problem, though, is definitely how little Gene Hackman is in it. He is so thoroughly entertaining and steals the show in every scene he's in. The actor died fairly recently in February of 2025 as well, so rest in peace, Gene Hackman. You are the best part about this whole series of movies. Overall, Superman the movie is a flawed yet extremely enjoyable and charming time, with great acting and pretty good action and visual effects for the time. That tagline wasn't lying. I really believed a man can fly when I watched this movie. Though not perfect, I am super glad this movie exists, and so I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10. Oh, and side note, I know Superman reversing time is dumb, but this movie is so solid that I'm willing to excuse it. Superman 2, released in 1980 and directed by Richard Lester, is honestly kinda bad. The movie, in concept, sounds really fun. The three Kryptonians put in the Phantom Zone at the beginning of the first movie escape and make their way to Earth before beginning their plot to take over the planet. But in execution, their plan just seems really lame. They just wander around being a pain in the ass before finally deciding to go and confront Superman. And speaking of Superman, his plotline about giving up his powers for Lois is the dumbest shit I have ever seen. So basically, Lois finds out that Clark is Superman, so he takes her to the Fortress of Solitude, where his mother tells him that he's not allowed to have a girlfriend as long as he's Superman. Why, you ask? Well, I don't know, because the movie does not explain it. And he only gives up his powers for like a couple of hours at most. He gets beaten up at a diner and then just goes straight back to the Fortress of Solitude and gets his powers back. How does he do this, you might ask? Well, again, I don't know, because the movie is not interested in explaining. And then at the end, he just wipes Lois's memory with a memory wiping kiss. Okay, I guess. I know a lot of the stuff I'm criticizing is probably explained in the Richard Donner cut, but I haven't seen it and probably deserves a video of its own anyway. 10,000 likes and I'll watch it. I don't really have that much else to say about this movie. The plot is weak, nothing really happens, character motivations make no sense. And so here's a list of random observations and thoughts. Non makes gorilla noises for some reason. Lois Lane is an idiot for not figuring out Clark is Superman sooner. The first 10 minutes is just a recap of the first movie for some reason. This whole film is desperately trying to skirt around not being able to use Marlon Brando. The movie is weirdly similar to Man of Steel in a way, with General Zod being the villain and Superman being kind of an asshole. For some reason, I always thought that Ursa in this movie was Feora, and I only found out that her and Non were both made up for this movie while making this video. So as you can probably tell, I don't really like this movie all that much. That doesn't mean there aren't any positives. For starters, I do like Terrence Stamp as Zod. He walks around like he owns the place, it's great. It's just a shame he doesn't get to do much in this film. Gene Hackman is amazing again. I would have liked to have seen Otis more with him, but he's still absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about this film. It's not terrible, it's not good either, so I give this movie a 5.5 out of 10. Yeah, that seems good. This movie was absolute torture to get through. Superman 3, released in 1983 and again directed by Richard Lester, is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. The movie flops around from plot point to plot point, never focusing in on one thing. The characters don't really have much depth, and the villains in this film are just painfully dull. Gone are the days of the great Gene Hackman, and in his place is this guy. I can't remember his name, and I don't care enough to look it up. All you need to know is that he's trying so hard to be Lex Luthor and is failing miserably. This is usually the part where I explain the plot of the movie, but I honestly think that if you hadn't seen it, you would not believe me. Basically, Clark goes to Smallville and starts dating Lana Lang. Meanwhile, Richard Pryor gets hired to steal coffee, I think. And then he gives Superman some dodgy kryptonite and turns him evil. And then he builds a supercomputer in the last 30 minutes of the whole film. It comes out of absolutely nowhere. Yeah, absolutely nothing in this movie makes any sense in context. It feels like a bunch of disconnected plots haphazardly sewn together, and despite its chaotic energy, it still manages to be boring. The whole movie also gets rid of most of the supporting cast from the first two, including Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, which really doesn't help. Now, in this film, Lois is replaced by Lana Lang, and her absence is felt greatly. But I actually do think Lana is pretty good in this movie. Sure, she's kind of flat, but she serves her purpose in the story and doesn't do anything overly offensive, which is something I can't say the same about Richard Pryor's character, Gus Gorman. This character just really pisses me off in every scene he's in. He's constantly overacting and getting into wacky slapstick situations in the most contrived way possible. Like, the whole skiing scene is probably the most forced setup for a terrible joke that I've ever seen. So saying this, I do like how the first scene of the whole film is literally him just collecting his dole. That's kind of funny. I do want to talk about the whole evil Superman thing because it is honestly comical. He's not even really evil, he's just going around being a nuisance, except for the scene where he tries to seduce Lana Lang while people are dying horribly. Man, that took a turn. The scene is actually kind of haunting in how it's acted. It is ruined though by the fact that I cannot take evil Superman seriously when, to portray how evil he is, they just desaturate the colours of his costume and give him stubble. Yeah. I also hate the fact that this movie has an original villain. He isn't even a good one, he's so boring. This is going to become a trend for all these movies going forward. The only villains they really use are Lex Luthor and General Zod, and that's it. Superman has a huge rogues gallery and I don't get why they're so afraid to use it. I really can't wait for Man of Tomorrow next year because it'll be the first time we're getting a new villain adapted for the big screen, that of course being Brainiac. Overall, this movie sucks. It's one of the worst films I had to watch for this video and you could not pay me to sit through it again. 3 out of 10, let's move on. Before making this video, there were only 3 Superman movies I hadn't seen. Those being Superman 3, Superman Returns, and of course, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Released in 1987 and directed by Sidney J. Furie, this film follows Superman as he tries to destroy all of the world's nuclear weapons. The movie was and still is absolutely despised, with it being considered one of the worst movies of all time. But honestly, I kind of don't hate it, weirdly enough. That's not to say it's good or anything, but for years people kept telling me how bad it was, and so when I finally went to watch it, I think my expectations were just on the floor. I think my enjoyment of this film mostly hinges on how short it is as well. While the other films in this series sit at around 2 to 2.5 hours long, this movie is only around 80 minutes, which makes its bullshit a lot more bearable than Superman 3. This movie brings back most of the supporting cast that was absent in the previous, such as Margot Kidder's Lois Lane and Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, and the two of them are doing a pretty good job. Plenty of new characters were introduced here as well, including Lacey Warfield and her father David, as well as Lenny Luthor, Lex's nephew. My favourite new character in this movie is without a doubt Nuclear Man. While it is frustrating that they've yet again not adapted any villain from the comics, Nuclear Man is still enjoyable, and I think that's sheerly because I think he's hilarious. I mean, just the thought of him is funny, like, he's Nuclear Man, you know? And for some reason they dubbed all his lines with Gene Hackman's voice, and then they draw attention to it as well.
I am the father now. You have my voice. No, you have my voice.
I have no idea why they did this, but I'm glad they did because it is one of the best parts of the movie. Another thing that people have pointed out about this movie is how Superman is kind of a scumbag in it. I mean, he reveals he's Superman to Lois again, only to vent to her before wiping her memory. Again. This was the most frustrating thing to me. I got really excited when I saw that Clark was finally going to reveal the truth to Lois, only for him to pull that kissing thing again. Then later he goes on a date with both Lois Lane and Lacey Warfield at the same time as Superman and Clark Kent, respectively. He has to do all this dumb shit to make sure they don't find out what he's doing when he could have just not agreed to go on the date. Whatever, I guess. Greedy fool just had to have two girlfriends. Now, despite all this, there are some really solid Superman moments in this movie, like when he addresses the crowd at the subway, or when he speaks in foreign languages, or his whole speech at the end. You can tell that Christopher Reeve himself wrote a lot of this stuff. Overall, despite having some decent moments and being more enjoyable than Superman 3, it is still, at the end of the day, a bad superhero movie. So I'm giving Superman 4 Quest for Peace a 4 out of 10. Superman Returns, released in 2006 and directed by professional scumbag Bryan Singer, is a semi-reboot, semi-sequel. Yeah, it's confusing, I know. The film ignores the events of the last two films and acts as a direct sequel to Superman 1 and 2, but it doesn't really feel like it. The movie is extremely basic and has a really simple plot, and yet for some reason it's 2.5 hours long, and my god, do you feel every second of it. I went into this film really, really wanting to like it, but it's just so dull and drags on for way too long. None of the characters are interesting, they've all seemingly had the life sucked out of them while still trying to do impressions of the original cast. Speaking of the cast, Kevin Spacey plays Lex Luthor, and despite looking like Gene Hackman, he has absolutely none of the wit or charm that Gene Hackman had. He just kind of stands there trying to look cool and ends up looking really dumb. Brandon Routh isn't much better as Superman either. I like his Clark well enough, but he seems to be playing Superman in a similar way to how Henry Cavill would do later. Kate Bosworth sucks as Lois Lane, I'm sorry. Gone is the snappy and quippy Margot Kidder, and instead we have the really stern and serious Lois of this movie. Now I know, I'm hating on the cast a lot, but I really don't blame any of them for my not liking this movie. I mostly blame the director. Yes, X-Men director Bryan Singer directed this film, and his vision for Superman is so uninspired. He basically had the opportunity to do whatever the hell he wanted with Superman, and this was what he landed on. Another real estate scheme involving Lex Luthor. While we're on the subject, I do want to point out how dumb Lex's plan in this movie is. He wants to make this Kryptonian island out of crystals so that he can sell it, but the island he makes just looks like shit. It's miserable, like no one would ever want to live here. Now, despite all my criticisms, like the other movies, this one does have things I like. The whole tone and vibe is really cool, it feels really ethereal and epic. I love the scene where doctors are trying to treat Superman in a hospital, but because he's bulletproof, none of their needles can actually penetrate his skin or anything like that. And I do like this moment.
Look, in the sky, Chief.
It's a bird. It's a plane.
No, look, it's... You wanted to see me?
Before I finish up talking about this film, I do want to quickly mention how weird the whole thing with Lois's kid being the son of Superman is. After Superman 2, he wiped her memory of all the time they spent together, including when they slept with each other. It's so weird how she doesn't question at all how she gave birth to Superman's son when she has no memory of ever, doing it with him. James Marsden's character also never finds out, and that's also really weird. Overall, I give this movie a 4 out of 10. It's boring as hell and I never want to watch it again. Oh, holy shit, finally. This is the first decent movie since the first one, oh my god. Man of Steel, released in 2013 and directed by Zaddy himself, Zack Snyder, was the beginning of Warner Bros. DC Extended Universe, which ended up being a big failure, but we're not here to talk about that today. This movie's plot is kinda hard to explain because it flip-flops between the present day and flashbacks, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I actually think it works quite well for this movie. There's a big focus on Krypton and its failings here as well, which I almost find interesting, but the themes and lore of the planet and its whole plot line are so poorly thought out. You're telling me that a civilization that had access to space travel for 1,000 years couldn't predict that the whole planet was about to blow up? Seriously? The cast of this movie on paper is pretty good. The only problem is that not a single one of them has any sort of direction. I like the idea of Henry Cavill as Superman, but my god is he bland in this movie. He just stands around ore farming the whole time, and whenever he does speak, all his lines are really stilted and awkward. Amy Adams as Lois Lane could have been really great as well, but she too suffers from a lack of direction and terrible dialogue.
Perry, come on, it's me we're talking about. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter.
Then act like it.
The only actor in this movie who seems to be actually trying is Michael Shannon as General Zod, and my god is he having a good time.
I will find him!
Every second he's on screen is entertaining. He absolutely steals the show, and I feel no shame in saying that he's up there with Gene Hackman and Heath Ledger as one of the most entertaining performances in a comic book movie I've ever seen. And when talking about this movie, you kind of have to mention the sheer amount of destruction caused by Superman's fight with Zod. I mean, this shit is borderline apocalyptic. I know Snyder himself said that around 5,000 people died, but he can politely piss off. Dark level of city, there is no way any less than 1,000,000 people died here. And people like to say, oh, but there's loads of destruction in James Gunn's Superman as well, why isn't that a problem? Well, it's because Superman wasn't actively bringing the villains to populated areas and ore farming instead of saving people. That's the difference. I want to quickly mention the score here as well. Hans Zimmer made the music for this film, and despite not being as iconic as John Williams' theme, it's still really good. Overall, Man of Steel is a decent but flawed movie that is incredibly entertaining. Doesn't mean I'm going to start worshipping the director though.
When DC was in the darkest day, one man stood up among the fray. His name was Zack Snyder. God bless, save DC from this awful mess.
I give Man of Steel a 6.5 out of 10. And so we've come to the final movie on this list. Superman, directed by James Gunn and released in 2025, is brilliant. I don't even know where to start with this movie. Every great thing about it has already been talked to death about here on YouTube. From the amazing cast, the fun plot, the visually interesting cinematography, there is just so much to love about this film. Like Man of Steel, the movie's plot is kinda hard to explain because it's sorta like a week in the life of Superman. Basic premise is that Lex really hates Superman, and Superman is a punk rocker. The movie is very much a reaction to the last 12 years of Superman discourse. Ever since Man of Steel released, there's been so much tiring debate about who and what Superman is meant to be. Some would say he's an overpowered Boy Scout, while others would say that the only way to make him interesting is if you make him evil. But with the release of this film, the general consensus has been restored to what it used to be, and that is that Superman is the embodiment of kindness and hope. Whilst making this video, I went through the screenplay of this movie, and there's a line in there which shows me just how much James Gunn understands this character. The line reads, "It's commonly said that Clark is the mask and Superman is the real personality, but I believe the truth is more complex, and the real Clark/Superman is somewhere in between, only revealed to those who know both." I think that in this simple line that isn't even in the film, Gunn showed that he understands Superman more than any other filmmaker has, and I mean no disrespect to any of the other people involved with the other movies. I just wanted to shed some light on this part of the script that I've never heard anyone talk about. I think the best part about this movie though, weirdly enough, is without a doubt how it makes you feel. It is the most hopeful movie I've ever seen and moved me in a way that none of the movies on this list had since Superman 78. The characters in this movie are probably the best they've ever been. David Corenswet as Superman and Rachel Brosnahan as Lois are amazing in their roles and have such chemistry with each other. But I think it's Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor and Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific that really steal the show here. Holt's performance is almost as good as Gene Hackman's was, and Gathegi's Mr. Terrific seems like a random inclusion in this movie, but he slots in really well into the story. In fact, the Justice Gang as a whole work really well. It would have been so easy for them to bloat this movie or just exist with the intention of making spin-offs and sequels. They're actually important to the plot and don't really take the spotlight off our main characters. Score and soundtrack here is also great, like all the other movies before. It's a mixture of John Williams' score and some new elements from John Murphy and David Fleming. I also really like the needle drops of 5 Years' Time by Noah and the Whale, and of course everyone knows and loves Punk Rocker by the Teddy Bears, which is a song that's now pretty much tied to this movie's identity. Now, in spite of all this, there are still a few problems I have with this movie. The first of which being that some of the VFX shots look a little bit unfinished in a few areas, which is kind of weird because this movie had a whole year of post production. No shade to the VFX guys, by the way, those guys are great. Another problem I have with the movie is that we don't see much of the Daily Planet cast. We only really get a handful of scenes of them, even though they do play a pretty key role in the story. And this is a symptom of a bigger problem with this movie, which is the fact that it simply isn't longer. There are so many things that would have benefited from a longer runtime, which is an issue I hope to see fixed in Man of Tomorrow. Speaking of Man of Tomorrow, this movie is the official beginning to the new DCU, DC's second attempt at a cinematic universe, which is going much better than their last one. Because of this movie, I and many other people have newfound hope in DC's cinematic future. Hope that simply didn't exist 5 years ago, back when the Rock was trying to take over the company.
Because the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
And so, because of all of the things I just spoke about, I do not hesitate to give this movie a 10 out of 10. And so that's it. Every Superman movie reviewed. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Okay, I was only joking. I did put ranked in the title, so I guess I'm contractually obliged to rank all the films, so here it is. There you go. That's my final ranking. Watching all these films has given me a newfound appreciation for the character of Superman. Even though most of the movies on this list aren't very good, they still, at their core, embody what makes Superman great. It's not the super, but the man. This is a decades-old character created by two Jewish men who wanted to give people hope during one of the darkest periods in human history. And that's what Superman is all about, isn't it? Hope.
You piece of shit. Alien! That is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I'm as human as anyone. I love, I get scared. I wake up every morning and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time. But that is being human. And that's my greatest strength. And someday, I hope, for the sake of the world, you understand that it's yours too.
We're living in a dream world!
Good. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better. And on my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.
I just wish you could all see the Earth the way that I see it. Because when you really look at it, it's just one world.